the tests, I'm going to give you reasons why I chose this one. Were any of the options a pen and pencil test? And I'm going to explain why.
The only one that I am aware of that remains a pen and pencil, and they're leaving it, is the Terra Nova. In 13-14, the state should be bringing in the park assessments, and those will be the secondary assessments. Those will all be online. My crystal ball tells me that by the end of the decade, that students will be tested by the state every year, and it will be online. Part of how I know that is we received a survey from State Ed last year asking for our digital information, how many computers we had, what age they were, what's our WAN size, our LAN size, who supports us. So they're checking that out in the state. The reason that it's not prohibitive in their minds is because you don't need to, like you do now in a pen and pencil test, you don't need to sit down all at the same time. So you could test your whole high school over the course of a week or two, because those tests also, those park assessments, are not all the same for every student. So I do not think that we're going to be seeing that anytime soon.
There was just some concern, I know, from some people that we're testing the students in a way that they're not used to being tested. When teachers give tests in class, they give a pen and pencil test, and now we're putting them instead in front of a computer. And I know, especially for kindergartners, some parents don't allow their 4- or 5-year-old children on a computer yet. There still are parents like that. So is that an issue for them? I don't know if they've had their testing yet. Is that they at a disadvantage, and how?
They are at the same disadvantage that every other 5-year-old coming to take that test is. That's why we looked at the size of their pool and the number of students that they have over time done this with. Because for our kids, it's our kids are still more exposed to technology, even if they've never seen technology or been on it, than I would say in some of the other neighborhoods. So I do understand what you're saying about a 5-year-old who's never taken a test on there. I would say that 5-year-olds over the next 10 years are going to be far more savvy about that. I feel confident, and I certainly wouldn't say this if it wasn't true. I feel confident that their pool and their years of experience and their number of students that they study mitigate that.
So have the kindergartners taken it yet?
I believe they started. Did they start?
Pretty sure they have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was
It's
just
not
wondering
Friday
if there were
today.
any problems came up, or
I didn't get any frantic emails or phone calls, and people generally don't hesitate.
That's a good sign. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody from the community with questions about the math testing?
I have a question. I heard that this testing was primarily for an evaluation for the teachers. Is that incorrect, or is that correct?
That is correct. In the introduction, I did explain that that is the reason that we are initiating testing, but I do see value to it because of the differentiation that it can present for kids in terms of, even with their AIS teachers, if they have AIS, being able to focus on specific skills in ways that we never had this information before. But yes, it's required, some form of testing like this is required by the state in order to fulfill the teacher's evaluation.
Okay, because I didn't think that was good. I thought it sounded in the presentation as if it was mostly for students being evaluated. But
No, actually, it's not really to evaluate students at all. I mean, it's not in the sense of we think about a grade as, did I do well or didn't I? And I think Jill was explaining a little bit of this, that it's not so much about how did the student do. It's more about from wherever that student is judgment on the individual child. It's not giving him or her a grade or assessing him or her in any way to put him into a pool. It's really more to make sure everybody grows by whatever is the appropriate number in that group.
I also want to say that in the following the directions of the superintendent, and when this came out of initially, it came out of really two places. One place is, for all my years giving audits, Ralph has said, I need more information. This is exactly the information that some members of the board and community have asked for. What do you mean my child got a 4? Give me something to work with, or tell me what that means. So that's one piece. The other piece is when the governor passed the legislation for the APPR, the superintendent made a commitment that we were not going to use the children to accomplish the governor's goal. And so what path could we take that could benefit the kids in that? We're going to put more information about those kids in the hands of the teachers. This may wind up being helpful in their improvement for their own evaluation, but more importantly, they're going to be better able to grow the students to be more successful on this test, on the next test, on the classroom tests. So we try to step away from being reactive and responsive on that gutter level of, okay, we have to give teachers a number, so we're going to test your kids, because we are concerned about the effect that it has. For example, teachers need to get used to the idea that it doesn't take 180 days to teach everything. We've mashed 180 days into, so it takes 180 days to read like a second grader, it takes 180 days to learn physics. It makes no sense. So that's kind of the magic that teachers have learned over the history of time, is to make something work in 180 days. So I would argue in 175, if I give you more information about how the kids learn, and I can help you differentiate, because we've been hearing a lot about differentiation. We also know that we have a much more diverse community in the country. So how do we meet their needs? We have more kids coming in to the gen ed classrooms from special education. How do we deal? You saw the breadth of a normal group of, any random teacher's kids are going to have that breadth. So we try to maximize, while following the law, we try to maximize a product that could help grow the kids and give the teachers the information they need to help grow the kids. And in the course of doing that, we will have a number to put on their evaluation.
My other question is, are all the districts around us using the same evaluation system?
No. Some are using NWEA. Do we know what Arlington is using? Oh, they're developing all their own tests, all 9 million of them.
But each district has to have some type of...
Yes, it has to be either a regionally developed test, but Arlington is so big they're considered a region. The people who develop the tests should be done with those things in mind: validity, reliability, rigor, alignment to the Common Core, and a fifth one. And then the superintendent needs to sign off on that test. So we chose, because there's many, many tests that we had to do that with. For example, home and careers, 7th grade social studies and 8th grade social studies. We did it for participation in government and economics. We're not sure what we're going to do with social studies 9, because social studies 10 and 11 do have state exams, because if the state exam trumps it. So for the Growth 20, for example, in U.S. history, the Regents exam is the growth number. For the local number, then they can use reading for information from the NWEA. So as much as we could infiltrate NWEA across the district, the more we felt, and the teachers felt, and I agree with them, that there's a fairness as much as we possibly could.
So I have a question.
Please come up to the microphone and state your name and address so that we have everything recorded.
My name is Satyajit Pratap. Can you guide yourself? Is it scenic drive? So this is a two-part question. Basically, the first one is, are the RIT scale, is that like a national level averages or is it local?
National.
Okay. The second part is, I was reading of something about it. So if there is a grid score of, I'm just going to pick up a number of 190 or 200, and you get those 75, 50, and 25th percentile blocks. It kind of talked about something using a Lexile mapping, if I'm using the word correct. Is that something that we're going to use?
Yes.
Okay.
They're going to give us, the Lexile is a way of knowing where a child is in their ability to read. So that is another piece of information that we're given, so teachers know. In the past, we've used something, we're still using something called the DRA. So what we'll get from this is we're able to read, and the Lexile, I can't speak off the cuff about it, but we will have the Lexile numbers, and the teachers know how to work with them in terms of independent reading and instructional reading, what level they need to be giving the kids that, because we have large class libraries. But also the Common Core demands that they are given exposure to and are required to work in material that are above their grade levels. So they'll use their Lexile level to determine, what they need to do with each individual child.
Great, thank you very much. I think that's very useful because I think moving away from DRA onto Lexile is more standardized in comparison to the subjective opinion about numbers.
Right, because the DRA is subjective.
It is.
But it was the best we had. It was the best we had until now.
No complaints about it. I wanted to understand if you're actually, since we're going standardized, are we going all the way or are we going down?
Yeah, what we've talked about is, though, we like not to be knee-jerk about things, so how we left it with the principals is if your teachers are comfortable with the DRA and they still want it, give this first NWEA test, get your Lexile scores, and see if you want to spend the time doing that. There's no rush to make the decision. I mean, I agree with you, but it's up to them, but they will be using the Lexile information.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jen Herrera on 15 Old Farms Road. Is this information that you see giving out to parents as we did with the DRA information on our report card or something? Is this something that, I know that it's a little busy on the maps, but you said that we can get to these scores and see where our child would lie in the RIT numbers. Is this,
Our teachers have access to their class.
yes, but is this something that you could give for my child so that I could see where he ends up? Because I know that I've taken the DRA numbers off of my kids' report cards and used them to map, what books they should be reading, what I should be pushing them toward. But then again, you're saying that you're using this as teacher evaluation. So if some parents in the class then are able to work with their children and raise scores, does that skew your teacher evaluation? If you gave this information to parents.
Our goal is to grow kids.
Yes.
So if in your house you can grow your kid more than I can grow my kid, bless you. We want the kids to grow, but we're trying to take this in steps. The teachers and the principals have not gone through what's called the stepping stone training yet, because the NWEA stepping stone training is specifically held off until they're working with their own real data. So they're scheduled to come in at the end of October. The superintendent already has meetings scheduled with the principals to discuss how, after they really see what they have and what it can offer them, what's the best way to move this information out to the parents. But until they're trained and they get the idea of what it is and how much it is, then we'll have that discussion. And I would say certainly before the next testing, that will be done. But I can't see it being done past November.
So perhaps next year when we sit down, when you take this test in September, our child's teacher can show us, maybe in their October teacher-parent meetings that we have, especially with the younger kids. We have these parent things where they sit down and they show you, this is where your child is in their report card, this is their DRA score from last year, or their Let's Read score.
My son's teacher this year told us that at the November conferences, that she would be sharing the results of their tests with the parents.
The elementary principals did decide to do that.
Oh.
So in November at the half days, when
Yes.
parents come in for the meetings, that will happen.
Yes.
The secondary principals have not made a decision yet because it's a little bit different. It's not as easily aligned to one teacher the way it is in the elementary grades.
Yes, so I'm very excited to have more information just because I get the test scores and I'm like, okay, 4, great. 3, I should be doing something, but I don't know what.
Right.
Thank you.
And I also heard that, they also said that the teachers may be discussing the results with the actual students as well. I heard, I don't know.
On the website, there's some PowerPoints, and they will talk to you about their vision for this is putting, and it is a pretty established way of doing things, is to put this information in the hands of the students so that they can be participants in their education, target what they want to do, and then that first test, when they see their growth, then you've got them hooked. Now that will mitigate some of the fears we have about some of the older kids taking this seriously. When you've taken it since kindergarten and you've watched yourself grow and been part of the process, it's less likely that you would not take it seriously. That's what we're hoping anyway.
George Gifford, 1 minute drive. I think you may have stated this before, but maybe you can illustrate it for me. So, for the 5th grade, given the range of students' abilities, they take a test in the beginning of the year, and then is the goal that over the course of the year, that all students have grown in equivalent amounts, grade equivalents, or that each student has grown by some amount, so that as a whole, the grades, everyone's moved one grade forward.
When the 5th grader sits down and tests the first time, and this won't happen again, the first time they sit down, the test self-adjusts. So it is our goal that every child grow. We don't have enough experience with the test, but we do know what the norms are. So I'm not going to tell you I want a child to grow 20 points, unless I want to leave town quickly. So based on the norms, I would say that the goal, if I'm a 5th grade teacher, it's not for my state 20, going back to the APPR, but for my local. So I'm going to say to my principal that 85% of my kids are going to grow 4 grid points.
I'm sorry, you've got to translate that.
Okay.
So I'm really trying to get a sense of, if you have a kid who comes in is at the lower end of the 5th grade in their capabilities, and the kid in the 5th grade who's at the higher end in terms of the width, are they both going to grow 20 points, or is one going to grow by 5 and the other by 15? I mean, what's the
Nobody can grow that much.
No, but what is a reasonable? I'm not trying to be exact. I'm trying to get an idea of the concept.
Okay.
What's the idea here? That everyone grows a little bit, or that some people grow more than others? What's the approach?
The approach is that we're individualizing by child. That we want every child to move from where they are to somewhere else. What we're giving our teachers, because this is our first year with it, we went to the growth norms, which are at the 50th percentile. I would argue that our district nationally is not at the 50th percentile. So if we go with the 50th percentile ranges, we will be safe until we know what we're doing. So we're targeting that 50% growth number. So for kindergarten, if it's 9 points, that's what we would say. 85% of my kids are going to grow 9 points.
Okay.
And that 9 points is coming off of the growth norms, the national growth norms at the 50th percentile.
So in general, you'll have a target for a majority of a grade to move by some amount, and there will be outliers that will grow by less or grow by more.
Yes, 85% of them will
So
get
correspondingly, then, is there any acknowledgement by the district that if you visualize these tests to this extent, that you identify large groups of kids scattered throughout the classes who need help in certain areas, that it makes sense to bring them together and teach them those skills rather than subject the entire class to those skill improvements?
What we're going to,
I
yes.
recognize the value of a heterogeneous classroom, but sometimes you have to say, you guys have to come together, we're going to give you a special lecture on this topic to move you up.
things that I'm looking at for the results that are, coming in as the tests are completed is who are those kids who aren't in that clump in the middle?
Right.
And the first question I want to know is, are they in academic intervention? Have they been through the RTI? I have to be careful, RIT, RTI. Have they been through the RTIT? What does the principal think about this group of kids? Are they getting academic intervention? If they are they grouped together? Is there something about our schedule that may need to change so that moving forward they can be grouped together? Because specifically for what used to be called remediation, homogeneity is helpful. For general education, homogeneity runs counter. So, you know what I'm saying? And part of our problem is our size. So, but we are taking a look at this, and that's why we're rolling it out very carefully to see what other information it can give us.
How do they kind of line? The kids that are in AIS, they have to take a separate set of tests in addition to the MAPS testing. And then how does that kind of all align? Because I'm still, I teach, and I'm still very confused because there's so much being thrown, and not just administrators, the teachers, and everything else. But how does that all kind of go together so that we're not constantly testing these kids over and over and over?
That's a good question. One of the things I do have to say about AIMSWeb was in our AIMSWeb training, that question came up from teachers. And she showed us that the more frequently you test when you're progress monitoring, the more improvement the student has. So there's a prejudice that we have against testing that is kind of global that I think we need to put aside. But your question is as excellent as George's in that is, and the DRA question. We are watching these things as we roll this out. We don't want to push the maps in and pull out AIMSWeb and pull out DRA till we know what we're dealing with. So we are handling a lot right now, but we can't give this test every 6 weeks. I can't give this test every week, but I can use AIMSWeb that frequently so that I can take a child into academic intervention, set goals, intervene, test them, know what to do, move them forward so that by the time they get to this January administration, they may even be out of academic intervention or improve. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we do know that we are inundated with data. But we're looking at letting go of the bathwater. And so we don't know yet whether that's part of the bathwater or DRA is part of the bathwater.
And don't get me wrong, I think it's great that you're given these goals to work toward and everything else. I do think part of the reason why kids get better with testing is because it's a test practice of it. I mean, if you're being tested the same way every single time, just by nature, and maturity, you're going to get better at it. So I think that we all have to, as anything, that and that kind of look at it and really analyze it in a way that's going to make the most sense. But I do appreciate it, I asked Mr. Carroll, I think several questions about it. I do appreciate your presentation. It does, give a lot more information. I still have similar concerns like Jill, because when you have kids in front of the screen as much as we do, I said some kids still look at it as a toy versus, looking at it as a learning assessment, and it's not necessarily authentic either, at this point, because kids aren't being tested, they're not being instructed on the computer, but I guess there's really...
But it's true nationally.
Yes.
So it's true in Louisiana, it's true in Minnesota, and it's true in, in Spackenkill. So, I trust that it's neutralized. I do agree with you, but I trust that it's neutralized. Testing over and over again certainly hasn't improved our 3s and 4s. And they've been taking those tests for a long time. So it's not just taking the test. I think it might be the comfort. They might get more comfortable with it. But they are going to be, your kindergartners are going to be tested in the high school on computers, and we may no longer be talking about backpack problems because they will not be carrying books.
on the website samples for us to look at of the type of tests, like where our children are in elementary, middle, or high school? If we go to that website, are there samples so that we can view a portion of like what?
Of the SWEA test?
On the math test. My son Nathaniel has Andrea Davis, so she said she was going to show them a video, to compare them.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something we can view?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's on the website.
Yep.
To give us an idea of what, because my impression, if it's anything like the summer program for the youngest kids, is it's fun for them. There's cartoon characters, explaining what the instructions are. My son is not a computer kid, purposely on my begging, kicking, and screaming and forbidding, just trying to keep him as far from it at times, which is a deficit. But my understanding from Mrs. Davis was that it's a fun, interactive gauge of, and she's not deeming it a test to them, which I really like, and that was the one point was, these are evaluations of growth, which I think
They're measures of growth.
Yes, and to say at the end of a year that a teacher has done or not done her job to their full potential by that one test to me is a shame. Because
Which
I
test?
feel the standard test that we are currently using, not this type of testing, the standardized test. Because if a child goes in and tests poorly, it has a lot of times no reflection on what that teacher has brought out about in their growth in so many other areas that those tests don't address. Or maybe that child just isn't a skilled test taker, or there's something going on. So this to me is an improvement to what we're doing. Why did we pick, as a district, pick this program? Could you explain that
Maps?
from the
We
beginning?
did study all that were on the state-approved third-party assessments.
Are there other districts nearby that you deferred to with questions?
We had a committee of teachers, elementary, from the 2 elementary schools and from the middle school. Did we have a high school principal with us? I think we did. I know, but you went with me to Pine. We went to Pine Plains because they've been doing this test for a number of years. We spoke with the administrators and the teacher there. I was up at Cap Region BOCES, who's been doing this for 7 years in the Capital Region. And I do have a bias. I have a bias about people who make money off testing kids. So we didn't want to go with Pearson. I'll say that out loud.
Thank you.
And this was the only not-for-profit research-based group that had a good number of years of experience and data from which to pull. So, for example, when I looked for the growth norms, they had the 2011 growth norms up. I mean, it doesn't
I
get
just
any
wanted to know
better.
if anyone locally that you were able to work with, so
We did.
I'm happy to hear that.
We did go to Pine Plains, however, they do not work with Cap Region, and I wanted a BOCES that had experience with it.
How, when you say that this is, the RIT is a national,
Its score is
score is national, but how does that,
It's based on the
Really
national, so based on the national norms.
but if every district gets to choose their own, there's a limited number of programs in which a district can choose from, like you're saying Arlington is making their own.
Their own.
So how can that apply to the national norm?
It doesn't. The RIT score is a MAPS measure. It's an equal measure between two numbers, from kindergarten to 12th grade.
Maybe there were districts using maps before it became a requirement. So across the country, there are districts that have been using maps for 5, 10 years. And
If they generate their own tests, how is that gauge the same as us
That's
using a
different.
test that's,
That's not maps, that's different. We're talking about people who use the maps testing, right?
maybe I just need to.
No, but I think I know what's getting you there. So let's talk about this neighboring district for their 20 points for growth. Instead of using a standardized test in the grades that don't give regents or state exams, they're making their own. We said we will use a third party, which is another choice that the state gives you, because we think it's fairer for students, parents, and teachers to have as much standardization K-12 as possible. So the RIT score is something that's common K-12 in our district based on national norms that this test established. So they're national norms based on all kids who took maps. Arlington won't be using that.
So it's only maps applicable. Any school that generates their own testing, we're not saying, okay, we're not comparing the entire national scores, they're national maps scores. Okay, that makes more sense to me. I got confused because I'm like, how can we kind of level the playing field nationally? The other thing too is, and I don't know what from K through 12 the teachers are referring to maps as. Andrea Davis chooses not to call it a test to our first graders, and I really appreciate that. And I think that growth and progress for our kids is really, really key with all this test pressuring, whether they're a kindergarten or a 12th grader. And kind of along the lines of what she was mentioning before me is that adding more tests to their mental worry is not necessarily good. Encouraging them to always look at their growth, their progress is encouraging to children, and that might be something that as the district, how we phrase it to our children, regardless of which grade it is, really could be key in not calling it a test. It's not a test. You know, it's progression. And that's a much more positive note, I think, in this age of children being stressed out in third grade over a test. If the children...
MAPS is Measures of Academic Progress. That's what it stands for.
Okay, and I think if we, as a district, what are we telling our kids this is? Testing you? This is a test? Because I know in first grade we're sent, my teacher in particular is not telling my first grader this is a test, which is great. I don't know what my third grader, I have to ask my fourth grader what his teacher is calling it.
You know, I have 3 kids right now in the schools from elementary to high school. Nobody came home and said we got tested, or, you know, we're just doing this maps thing. That's what I hear.
Right.
Like, what is maps? And my son goes, I don't know. We do something on the computer, and they want to see how much we're growing.
Yeah, and I have little kids, so I'm confident that those teachers are, and I think it could benefit all the kids. If it's not deemed as we're testing you 3 more times during the year on top of all the
I
other
know my son came home
tests.
and said he took a test on the computer.
Yeah.
So I do think it just
So I think if
depends on
there's a
what the
common
teacher's
phrasing
saying.
that they're used
This is
to,
part of the training. Part of the training is that principals work with the teachers in terms of how they were going to roll it out to the kids. And I think some of the principals did as well.
yeah, I'm thrilled with how my teachers are presenting. I mean, it's not. The other thing is, if children move from district to district, if our district is using this, we love that. How does that work? Coming in from a different district, going into a different district, if they're not using that? Like, do you feel that they're similar enough? Like if Arlington's making their own, I'm sure they're perfectly competent. Doesn't mean they're using the same information, but
I think anytime you have 2 different tests, you can't show growth because they're not measuring exactly the same thing. You know, even with all of the other third-party assessments, they're not all going to be like maps. They're not all going to be self-adjusting, necessarily testing on the same skills. So I think that the first time the
so there isn't an overall body of information that each school is held to making sure.
Yes,
no?
It's the 3 through 8 tests, and it's going to be 3 through 12 next year. That will follow a student. But we can use their data. If a student came from another district and whatever local test that they were given to show growth, we would have some indication of their growth. But we could bring them right into our next testing program.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? We're going to open up for the public hearing on the code of conduct. If anybody has any comments or anything you would like to say about the code of conduct, please step to the microphone, state your name, your address, and state whatever opinion or question you have.
Favorite topics. All right.
our district policy is called the Code of Conduct, and yet it's very negative and militaristic style writing. We talk about discipline. In fact, the first two sentences are about order and discipline are essential to education. Further, this orderly environment applies a code of discipline that clearly defines individual rights, responsibilities, et cetera. So although it has the title of Code of Conduct, it's really not about conduct, it's about discipline. Interesting enough, and I don't know who wrote this, but in the Todd handbook portion, they have a discipline policy that I would say is more about conduct. It's about core values, permeating the institution, drive the decision and the strongest reactions when they're violated. The community maintains core values and it's about respect for one another. Continuing strive to translate our core value into specific positive practices and behaviors. So it seems to me if we want to start a code of conduct off on the right foot and make a positive message, it should match more what Todd has and not so much what we have, which is about discipline. Then we talk about committing while on district property. This is number C under introduction. Okay. Committing while school district property, act of violence upon another student or any other person lawfully upon school property. So if the person's unlawfully there, or do we have the right to beat them up? Is that what that means? I mean, what does that mean? So why would we put the word lawful there? Why would we just say, you're not allowed to beat people up, or on our property? Or call the police maybe, I don't know. So I submitted a bunch of grammar edits, is that okay? Yes. All right, so I won't go through that. One question I did have is, I should write it there. The new section on the protected classes. Oh, yeah. Okay. That is. That is like 4 pages without a heading. 1, 2. This looks like the old technology use policy that I hated so much that took how many years to. All we're saying is you can't bully protected classes. I don't understand why it takes 4 pages to say that. And if you do, there's a compliance officer you can go to. I mean, why does that take so many pages? This looks like it was written by these lawyers, and nobody really made an effort to limit it, in my estimation. Also, under the new section, number T, letter T. I'm sorry, I didn't print the whole thing. But it's about selling and using drugs and all that stuff. I mean, listen to this sentence. Illegal substances include but are not limited to inhalants, marijuana, cocaine, LSD, PCP, amphetamines, heroin, steroids, lookalike drugs, and any synthetic version thereof, whether specifically illegal or not, commonly referred to as designer drugs, which are substances designed and synthesized to mimic the intended effects and uses of, which are chemically substantially similar to illegal drugs, which may or may not be labeled for human consumption. I mean, there were 3 witches in that sentence. I mean, and then followed by inappropriately using or sharing prescription and over-the-counter drugs, which is not a sentence. Which would be fine if it was a new heading, but it's all under T. And then the only other concern I had, let's see if I can find it. There was, I wasn't sure if my edits had been. Under maintenance of public order, there's a letter F that is missing an N in this version that you handed out. However, the N is not missing in the Todd book, the Code of Conduct that was handed out. So how did that happen? Because it's not highlighted as something that changed on August 2nd. So that makes me think
think, oh God, did I read the right version? And how do I know if I read the right version? And at what point do changes happen that are marked and not marked? Do you understand what I'm saying? So what I would like to see is next time you make a revision, I open up the book and it says, Code of Conduct, revisions made August 13th, 2013. It has a little revision mark. And then I can just go, oh, look, if they didn't make any revisions, oh, no, they did. On this page, there's a little revision mark right here. And I only have to read that section because I've read this like so many times. And then, in 2014, there'll be another revision mark. And it'll say, revision made in August 14th, and it'll be a different, like a little squiggly mark. And I'll go through and I'll say, oh, well, I already did this flat edge revision. I'll look only for squiggly marks. And I'll find those and I'll just read those. Then you come along and you go, oh my God, we're scrapping our whole code of conduct. We're starting all over. That's version 4.0. You see how that's how it, that's what that all means. So it would be nice if we could do that. And that way, it would just save a lot of people all the time, in my estimation. Okay, so that's all my comments about code of conduct and school conduct. Thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, we're gonna close the public hearing with this. If anybody has any questions or comments to the board in general about the agenda or any concerns, please step up right now.
Hi, just two things. First, for the maps testing, I fully understand the benefits that were described for maps testing. However, I do think that our students are increasingly subjected to assessment testing. So I would like to challenge the district to institute a metric by grade of how much time students should be sitting for quizzes, tests, state tests, maps tests. I think it's only reasonable that we look at this. I understand Jill's point about 175 days versus 180, but if our vision, in fact, is for our students to contribute to the global society, 180 school day calendar is an agrarian-based calendar. We are already shortchanging our children. So I think we really have to look at where we can ask teachers to lighten up and other tests to make time for these. Second, in terms of the strategy for the district, I do think that there's a lot of merit to this strategic plan, but I'd like to ask, there are sections of this that have been out there for a couple of years now, in particular for the student performance testing, whether in fact there has been any successful postgraduate survey to date. I asked Paul about that 2 years ago. He said it was going to be done. I haven't heard anything since then.
We have 1 year results that we just received from students who graduated a couple of years ago.
Okay, so then that will be
That will be on.
done every year
Report.
subsequent. Okay.
Yes.
So I'll be looking forward to my son saying that he got that request for a survey since he's out.
And make sure it takes it.
I will. And then secondly is in terms of the guidance report, most school districts do have a profile available on the website. Ours has not been updated since 2010, and it's actually quite outdated, and I'm not sure if that was done on purpose, because the district is not happy with the results of the classes of 2011 and 2012. But that's what is implied by not keeping that up to date. And subsequently, there's one thing that I wouldn't expect to be on there, but that you may have internally is students' acceptance in the first choice colleges. Is that also something that you guys have at least 1 year's worth of data on?
No, turns out they didn't keep that data last year, but they will be this year.
Right. Because with such a high percentage of our Spackenkill graduates going on to college, I think it is important to get a sense of, from the students or the parents' perspective, are we accomplishing what they set out to or not? We could argue the merits of the first, acceptance in the first choice of college, but I think in terms of their feeling that they found a path through this district's school system to what they're trying to achieve is important.
So what time
classroom the other night, he has one of the, I can't even say the word here, but it's like basically crappy ones because it's on wheels, you know, the portable ones. Are there classrooms that have them mounted that are being unused?
I don't believe so. Which building is he in?
Either Hagen or Nassau, I don't care which one it is. I just want to know if there's.
Hagen, I think it's not.
In Hagen, we only have one room right now that has a mounted one, but it's been scheduled to be delivered.
Okay. And that's a cost, I'm just thinking as well, so that goes into that.
It's about 2,000.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, it seems to be usage. And then two other quick questions, just for clarification. The driver safety program, the parents pay that, and then we, yes, the rest, so if there's no added district cost to that, okay. And then, Troy, this is not just a question for you, the Medicaid billing, what's the rationale behind the Medicaid billing? I know it's gotten a lot more complicated, a lot more in-depth and whatnot, but
Yeah, there's co-based notes that need to be maintained and for an audit. So we've had a consultant, but that consultant isn't in business anymore, so it's just with changing hands to somebody.
we've always done that.
Yeah,
It's not,
we've always done
it's not something that a teacher can do, and we're taking, that right away from teachers.
No, she gives us a list of students who are eligible and helps us maintain a record so that when we are audited, we would be compliant and get reimbursed for that.
All right.
Your policy 1117, again, if you're going to reserve the right to accept, reject, or modify any recommendations of an advisory committee that you put together, I really wish you wouldn't waste people's time and put the committee together at all. If this is supposed to be a committee that's representative of the entire community, there should actually be no reason that you would want to reject or modify. And I would rather you didn't waste people's time. The other item that was on the agenda, the other policy that you're updating, it says the board, upon a unanimous vote, may elect to open up a second public session if there are people who wish to speak a second time. So let me get this right. Grade level schools was the majority, but if someone wants to come up to the mic twice, we need it unanimous. Is that correct? Yes, sir. That's what this says, right? Okay, that seems a little work to me. So maybe, yeah, that really seems work to me. And then I was going to ask about the status of our negotiations with our teachers. We still in mediation.
Yes. That's all we can say, but yes, we're still in mediation.
And how much is that costing?
Don't really know that we've had one session with the arbitrator. It's complicated because there are attorneys involved, so we would have to really do the math on that.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Comments from the board? I have one comment about the policy on advisory committees. It is the board's responsibility to make decisions. The law does not allow the board to delegate making these decisions to committees. The education law gives the board the opportunity to form these committees as in advisory capacity. Advisory means those committees are advising the boards. They are not making decisions. The board cannot give up the authority given to them under the law to these committees. Advisory committees provide advice, and that's it. And that's what is stated in this policy.
Just have to make a motion to go into executive session.
Okay. We are going to go into, to make a motion to go into executive session for discussion of a potential discipline for a particular employee. And second? All in favor? Okay. into the public session.